Hello, I'm Rachel Norris, and in today's show demo I'm going to show how to make these lovely copper disc star and moon earrings using disc cutter techniques and hammering and drilling techniques. And in the longer demo, which will be uploaded to YouTube, you can incorporate these techniques into making this spectacular collar necklace. So let's get started. Right, here are all the materials that you need to make the project. You'll need a 0.4mm diameter copper wire and 1mm diameter copper wire. You need 0.5mm thickness copper sheet. It's beautifully shiny. You need some crackle quartz shards, or you could have some drops, either side drilled or through drilled. You'll just need more head pins, perhaps head pins for through drilled, top to bottom. 6mm round crackle quartz and some multicolored fluorite in 8mm rounds, and you'll need some head pins, and you'll need at least like a pack of 20, I think, for the necklace. You don't need any head pins for the earrings. And now we've got the materials, we'll move on to the tools. Right, I've got quite a few tools that we're going to go through using. Don't worry about the enormous array of tools. So I've shown you alternatives, and also, to be honest, they're an investment, because if you're going to make a lot of jewellery, you're going to use these, well, for forever, aren't you? So you'll certainly need most, if not all, the tools at some stage. So starting off with the wire working tools, you've got small and large faced hammers. I use generally the small faced hammers to get into the surfaces, into small spaces. Just make sure the surface is lovely and smooth so you don't mark your wire. You'll also need chain nosed, which are pointed pliers for gripping things and manipulating. I need 2 pair of those because I'm using them for jump rings as well. Round nose pliers, which are round forming pliers for making lovely round shapes and spirals with conical tips, and flush cutter pliers for making really neat, lovely, sharp, flat flush cuts, which are nice flat faces. It gives a good finish to your wire, not ragged. So you've got the pliers and hammers. You also need a really smooth steel block for your hammering of your wire. And that's that side of things. And then what you need is some mandrels to make jump rings, and these are showing some alternatives. So I've got a step mandrel there, and a 3 and a 5mm mandrel for making jump rings. And those are rods of metal rods. I'll explain a little bit more about those later. You also need pen and paper, pen and ruler and paper as well. So those are always useful, and especially so one of these markers, pens. I've got permanent marker for marking metal with, and it's ever so useful for when you're marking where you want to mark drill holes. When you're moving on to the metalworking side of things, you need, in this project, you'll need a disc cutter, and this is a metal block with kind of pegs of different widths, and in this one they are marked in American inches. So I've got 5/8, 9/16, etc. Now I take these pegs out. You can see that I've also put some, I've measured them in millimeters, so it's quite useful to do that when you get your proper ruler on it and mark it in indelible marker. So it goes down from 15mm or 5/8 of an inch down to 6.5mm, which is 1/4 of an inch. So that's sort of basically the disc cutter, and I'll show you that function in a minute. So I'll put that to one side. You'll also need some drilling implements. So I've got a Dremel, but I've also got a little hand drill. Will do the same, it just takes longer. And this for making a little pointed tool for making the holes wider. You also need some needle files, which I haven't got here at the moment, but you can pop those into the holes just to make them lovely and smooth, so the wire doesn't break and abrase over time. And then to make the to finish things off, you can use a file and to smooth surfaces. You've got a sanding block or an emery board will do, or some files to make surfaces smooth. And needle files are just smaller versions of these, just makes it a nice flat surface, and also round surfaces and conicals. There's all sorts of files you can get which are fantastic. You'll need a metalworking hammer. This is a hammer that you just don't care about with its surface, because you're not going to use it for anything else other than bashing something else onto something, and it doesn't matter if you're not going to bash it onto the metal itself. Going back to the hammers, you'll also need a ball end hammer as well for making round smooth shapes when you're doming larger pieces of wire, so you'll need one of those. So it's a ball end there. What have I done? I've covered. Now we're going for the doming side of things. So there's all sorts of doming blocks you can get on the market from Drill Maker, for example. And I actually used to make a round one here, like so, to make the domed surface of the components of the necklace. And to make the bead caps, I had this beautiful doming block, which has all these little beautifully finished rods with balls at the ends of different sizes, and they're all marked in the little block, which is beautiful. And you can actually store everything nicely and not lose anything. And in there is a gorgeous little doming block that you can look with lovely shiny little surfaces inside. And I've marked those two, which are the ones I'm going to use for the bead cap doming later on in the demonstration. And oh goodness, what I haven't got here is the little stamp I used for making the sunray discs, but basically I used some metal stamps to also do some texturing, and here's one I used for this little star. It's an Impress Art juniper range, 3mm, and in here is all sorts of different things, but the one I used has a little star face, and that's one I used to make a star. And you can get all these all lovely little stamps, and you can use them to stamp your metal and make all sorts of patterns, but I used a star for this project. And you will also need a either the end of an old screwdriver or a letter, let's say a letter I or something like that, to make a sunray, or even a V to make a sunray pattern. And you can use all sorts of things to make that sunray pattern, which we'll talk about later. Now I can't remember, have I missed anything out? Yes, and when you're doing the stamping and drilling and all those sorts of things, you'll need a sort of a safe surface to work on. And I've got cork mats and also rubber mats. I put everything on a rubber mat to absorb the kind of vibrations, cork mat, and then an old steel block, something that's not too important, and then I'll stamp onto the surface of the copper with onto that, and it all holds everything without it vibrating. And there's probably another thing that I've forgotten. Let's have a little think. So I've got the stamping side of things with that. I think if I forget about anything else, I'll mention it during the video, but I think that's enough to be going on with. I do try and give you some alternatives if you haven't got them. There's always a way around and a means to make do, and there's alternative textures and all sorts of things if you haven't got all the stamps and things like that. All right, let's get going with the project. For the earrings, we're going to use copper sheet like this, 0.5mm thickness copper sheet, to make the main disc in the centre, some moon shapes and some 8mm diameter discs, and we're going to emboss some stars on it. So I'm going to use a different hammering techniques on these other two discs later on. We can also use the 8mm discs for bead caps for the necklace in the longer demo. We're going to start off making the larger discs for the moons and the large components. So I'm going to use the disc cutter with a piece of copper sheet. A disc cutter here is a beautiful little tool, and it's got this peg that fits in to place. I'll explain a bit more about this in the longer demo. It's about a 5/8 or 15mm diameter that we're going to use. Place the peg into the hole and hold the peg really firmly against the metal. If you want to use gloves to protect your hands and eyeglasses to protect your eyes, please do. Then use a metalwork hammer and really bash this over cork and a rubber mat to absorb any vibrations. Really bash it hard. And you can see it's come through the metal, penetrated through the metal. Bash it through out the other side. It'll drop through. You can remove the copper sheet. You've got a hole in the copper sheet now. Beautiful little disc cut of metal, and that's ready to shape and form now. What we're going to do first of all is make a component that we're going to. It has another circle cut within it, basically. And that's the one we use to make up the lovely components for the necklace, for the earrings. And what I'm going to use is an 8mm rod, and you can do that by popping it on the metal or just checking that that's going to fit nicely as a hole in the metal and not going to be too large. And what I did was just pop a little dot on all the discs that I wanted to cut that way. In the centre, that would be the centre of this, and I popped a little dot on right in the centre, and I did them all the same so that I knew that the hole I was going to make was going to be exactly the same place. So bringing the disc cutter into place, just turning it around a bit so you can see a bit more closely. I'm going to put it into the disc that you already cut on the largest disc setting into the disc cutter, and I'll move it around gently with a little prodding tool until the little circle is right in the centre. Little dot is right in the centre of where you want to cut. I can't see very well because I can't put my eye over in front of the camera, but hopefully that's in the centre. Then you put the 8mm or 5/16 peg in. And press it firmly down so the metal doesn't shift about, otherwise you'll have marks over the metal, and do another bash through and out the other side, and there we are. I've got a lovely disc cut with another disc inside, and I've got another piece of metal. I've got two components out of that one. I've got the 8mm disc used for the little stars and the bead caps, and also the disc hole within a whole disc. Now we're going to make the moon, and you can experiment, but I want to make this sort of shape out of the moons so that they're all the same shape. I use the largest disc cutter shape first of all. So I cut a large disc, and you can draw the moon shape you want to have. So, for example, you can bring up, for example, another peg, and this peg I used was 11mm peg. I put that onto the disc and then drew around it with a marker pen, and you can change that if you want to have that in a different place. Maybe bring it in a bit, so you want to maybe not have that as wide. You can just bring it in. Okay, so you've got your shape. Now what you need to do is bring that into the block and carefully move it around until, again, I probably can't see it very well, until you just see the line. This, again, spend a bit more time to balance this up than I am. Bring the 11mm block in, or the 7/16 into place. I might have got it in the wrong place, but just make sure that little line, you can just about see it. Bash it through, and hopefully, yes, you've got a nice little moon shape. And this you can always use, perhaps make a leaf shape or another shape, or even pop it in to your smallest disc cutter block and make a very small bead cap. So don't waste any of the metal. You'll end up with lots of, I'll probably waste a bit of metal, but you'll end up with lots and lots of little bits of little holes in the metal, but you can get some other little bead caps out of that. And with this shape, I could even get a moon shape out of this. This is another way of using up that last bit of scrap metal. You can pop that in to the largest, it might not be flat enough, and largest this shape. This is another way of getting another moon shape out of the holes area, out of the metal with holes in. And just make sure that I've got a bit of gap there, so it won't make a perfect one, but you can imagine if I bash that through, that'll make another moon shape as well. So we've made some moons, we've made the 8mm discs for the earring components, and we've made all sorts of things ready to use in our projects. I'm now going to show you some different techniques for texturing and making some embossed sort of shapes onto your on stamping shapes onto your metal. So first of all, I'm going to just do the basic hammering technique for the moons, and you'll also need to use it for some of the discs in the necklace, but not the earrings. So I'll move that to one side, and that one as well. And just use a ball end of your hammer, and just, you can hold it with your fingers, but to be honest, it's not a good idea. I would use ply handles just to keep yourself out of position, out of the harm's way, and also maybe eye protection in case it just flies up anywhere. So little hammer all over the piece that you want to add texture to, and it makes a lovely sort of lunar surface craters to that moon. And what I forgot to say in the shaping part is that this edge of the moon is really, really sharp. So what you will need to do is just file it down, file those little edges down with a file. Make sure they're really, 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 really sort of rounded. So use some time just to file that down. And you can use an emery board if you want to, or a sanding block, and sand that round, and just sand around the edges of the shape just to finish it off. But certainly go back to those points and just actually round them off nicely. So you don't want anything dragging into the side of your neck at all when you're wearing as a necklace or earrings or any other piece. So we just make sure that's really, 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 really round. Okay, so that's the hammered texture. We're going to just create the sunray texture now. So I have completely lost my peg for making the sunray. So actually, I've just had to run around the house and find something quickly, and I've got an old screwdriver with one that you don't want to use, just with a nice thin tip, and this would be ideal actually, so you can use one of these. Again, place everything on the rubber mat, cork mat, steel block, an old steel block that you don't care about very much, and hold this in place really firmly over the metal where you want it to stay. You don't want it to jump around. Use your old hammer and hammer the top. I've made the first sunray facing downwards, and then just work around with the screwdriver or your little leather tool, or your letter I for an embossing thing, or anything like that, and work around with it across the whole width of the sunray. So do that bit first and work your way all the way around. And then what you need to do then is just do half ones in between the other full ones. So you only actually go halfway across the metal. If you can get as thin a screwdriver blade as you can with a nice rubber handle, that'd be ideal. This one's going to end up with quite a thick effect. And when you actually want to finish, you'll actually have little sun rays all the way around. This is a piece I've drilled into and shaped already, but you can see the effect. So the next effect we want to create is some stars. So get one of the 8mm discs and the little star impress art little shape there, and place it again firmly over the disc so that it doesn't move about, and do one like that, one little blow, and you can move it slightly. You're going to put 3 stars on this one. There, one little blow there, another there. So there we are, I've got 3 little stars there. The next thing we need to do is drill some holes into these shapes so we can attach them to our jewellery and put wirework onto them. You can use several tools or different types of tools to create holes in the copper discs, and they're all very good at what they do. And you can use a little hand drill. I use that anyway to create the guide holes. You can use Dremels, which are great and nice and speedy. And if you've got one of these, use these little hole punches on the 1.5mm settings. Just be careful where you place that so you can get your holes in the right place. I always mark the holes with a little marker pen, and the moons need to be marked at the top, and the copper discs need to be marked at 4 places at the bottom and 2 places at the side. The bead caps need to be marked in the centre with a hole there, and the star detail little discs need to have a little hole near the top on one side. So I'll move on to the demonstration. I'm just going to demonstrate how to use the hole punch. It's not something I use through the project in this case, but if you've got one of these, it's quite useful. I used a Dremel because I've got one, but if you haven't got a Dremel, this is something you can use instead. Just make sure that this little screw section, it is carefully placed over the hole. So just place the disc into the little unit and be really careful. Now, I can't see, because I'm actually working under camera, whether this is in quite the right place, but I'm just going to take it down, to screw this little rod down, just check that it's in the right place. I don't think I have, so I've just got to make sure that I'm just going to move it around a little bit, check that it's in the right place, and then more firmly keep screwing, and eventually you'll feel it going a little bit more easily through, and then you'll have got, and then unscrew it so it drops out and you've got a hole. The holes will be slightly bigger, so be careful not to bring it too close to a thin section, or else you'll break through the sides. But those are the 3 alternatives that you can use to pierce holes in your metal. Now we're going to put some drill holes into the shapes. This one I'm using an untextured one, so you can just see it a bit more clearly. But what I've done is used a little marker pen and mark where I want to make a little hole. And I haven't got the tool here, but we have some lovely screw down little hole punches you can use, or you can use a Dremel or a hand drill. If you're going to use a Dremel, for example, you do really need to make a little guide hole first. So I'm working on it over a cork mat, so that anything I drill into, it's not going to hurt the table or surface I'm working on. So I'm going to make a guide hole for drilling, and I'm just going to choose that one, and I'm just going to use a little hand drill just to make, with a little 1.2mm, 1.2mm is probably the best drill bit in it. And basically you can use there's bead reamers, and you can just put Dremel drill bits in there, and they're really useful. So use a bead reamer you can get in the large drill kit, or you can get these little hand drills. They're so inexpensive actually, and pop a Dremel drill bit or a drill bit in there, and you can use it. You can, if you haven't got a Dremel, you can just plod away like this, just circling this, and you'll eventually get through the metal. And if you haven't got too many to drill, you can use it that way. But if you've got a Dremel, it just speeds it all up. So I've got the guide hole there. I'm going to hold the piece still with my rubber end of the pliers. Again, use safety goggles. And I've got a 1.2mm drill bit in my Dremel. Place the Dremel upright over the disc that you want to drill. So you may not be able to see very well what I'm doing because I'm right out under the camera. So what I might do is just move the camera around so you can see me from the side. Right, here I hope you've got a little bit better view. Try and keep the drill bit perpendicular down onto the copper if you can. I'm going to have to do it from to the side so you can see it. Hold the drill bit and the drill firmly with one hand and press it into the guide depressional hole that you've made. Hold the disc down firmly with the rubber end around those pliers and gently go onto the low setting. And what I've done, there we are. I went onto the high just to get it through. It went straight through into the cork mat, and that little drill hole is done. What you do need to do is just sand the back of the drill hole down because it's really rough where it comes through. The best thing to do is just sand the back of the disc down a little bit with sandpaper or emery paper, and do the same when you're actually drilling the copper shape. You need to fit it to the frame, which we'll make later, but you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes in that. You might want to wait until we've made the frame, and then you'll have a better idea where to put the drill holes. And with the star shape, you'll need to put a drill hole in at the top, holding really carefully with your pliers, and with the moon, just a drill hole at the top with that. So make sure you sand down the back of where you've drilled, and you might want to wait to drill this shape after we've made the frame for it. But you'll need 1 hole at the top of the moon, 1 hole at the top of the stars, holding that little star shape really carefully with the pliers as you drill to stop it moving about. Use it on a really low drill setting so that it doesn't fire about too much. Wear eye protection, and these drill holes you'll see later on, they'll fit with the frame that we have in the later stages. So we're just going to move on to the shaping of these little shapes. We're now going to use some doming blocks, large wooden ones, just to give some shape to the earring component. I'm going to use this one here with a nice little circle. So we're going to turn this flat shape into a slightly more domed shape, which will add a bit more sparkle and shine to the earrings because it will catch the light at different directions. So place it front side down into the doming block, and use a ball headed hammer and hammer into the shape very gently all around. It doesn't take long, and you've shaped it into a dome. That's it, really. That's all you have to do. You might need to sand it down afterwards, but that's pretty much all. You could increase its doming by putting it into a smaller area, and again use the ball end, or you can use a wooden peg that comes with these doming blocks just to help you generate that little dome shape. There we go. Here are the templates that you need to use to make the wire surrounds for the earring and necklace components. You can see how they fit around the little discs, like so, with little lobes, and the holes in the disc correspond to the little notches and bends around the frame. You need 4 holes in the base of the frame and 2 at the side. This one is the base of the necklace, and it just fits the other way up, and it has a slightly longer arms and a few more loops, but it's just made in exactly the same way. So we'll go on to make that little wirework surround now. Before we do, I'm just going to show you the templates themselves without the discs in place, and you can see that there's a ruler next to it, and all you need to do is screenshot that, print it out, and you can use it to work from and make your shapes to scale. To make the earring surround a necklace component, you need about 15 centimeters of 1mm wire, and for this lower component you just need to make one of those for the necklace. It's 18 to 20 centimeters of 1mm wire. So take the wire and just start to make a downwards bend in the middle of the wire. We're going to make the central loop first using chain nose pliers, then bring the round nose pliers in and make a little loop. Okay, check this loop against the diagram, and you can either work on the diagram or you can just lift off every so often and just check it against the diagram and just shape around the diagram using it as a guide, making these little loops with little movements of the chain nose pliers around. I'm going to do this very roughly, just spend a bit more time shaping this wire so it really fits over the template nicely. And when you get to the top, just make us a really exaggerated loop, bring it round, grip the wire with pliers and bring the tail out, and then just cut the tail to size using flush cutter pliers and the diagram as a guide. And you need to do this on both sides, and you'll end up with a little template or frame like that. And for the lower one for the necklace, it's just like that. And what we need to do is curl the wire ends, and we're going to do that now and hammer them. So to work on these wire tails, just take the tips of your round nose pliers and just start to make a little curl. Trim the wire end off. The straight wire end won't curl properly with flush cutter pliers, and then just curl it back in again using round nose pliers again. Assume I've also done it to the other side. You need to do that both sides, but you just need to then hammer all the way around the shape. Well, not all of it, but nearly all of it. So I'll show you where. So you need to hammer these loops at the top on a steel block. Just going to zoom in so you can see a bit better. Hammer these on a steel block and just hammer the loops, but don't hammer anywhere else. And basically, and the other side as well. So you should end up with a nice hammered shape, like so. And the lower necklace surround just looks a little bit like that. So you need 2 of these for the earrings, 7 of these for the necklace, and 1 of these for the necklace. Now we're going to wire these onto the copper discs. Now we're just going to attach this lovely looped and hammered frame onto the shaped and textured and drilled little circle of wire ready to make up the component. So take about a 60 centimetre length of 0.4mm wire and just pass it through one of the holes near the base. And you've got 4 holes near the base that correspond with these intersection bends with the loops. You're missing out that bit, but that bend here, but we've just got the drill holes a little further up. So pass the 0.4mm wire through one of the lower holes to about the midsection of your 0.4mm wire, and then bring up the other component, the frame, and start just to loop around both frames like so, and keeping them from lying over each other. Just make sure they lie next to each other, and this bit of wire comes underneath and to loop round. So there's basically 2 little loops around this little intersection of bend. You can see that there. So pass this wire nearest to the centre underneath the disc to pass from the back to the front of the hole there. And so it's going to now be used to attach this next bend in the same way that you did the other one. Passing the wire through twice That's fine. And then what we need to do is just work around the shape and to attach all these two bends. I'm going to do that and then come back to the next little bit that we've got to do. I've now worked around the disc, attaching the loop shape into place, and I've ended up with passing the wire under the back of the shape once you've attached these loops, so they come out in these two holes from back to the front, projecting from the front of the shape on these two holes at the top. I'm just going to squash these little attachments flat with a gentle clamp of chain nose pliers to get them into shape, and also make sure they're flattened and that the frames lie out to the outer edge of the copper disc and not over it. So what I'm going to do now is just working on this side, wrap around the outer frame twice, and then bring the wire up and through the hole, and then bring the wire up inside the frame and to the outside of the copper disc, and then just start to wrap around this loop like a shepherd's hook sort of shape here, and wrap sort of 7 times here, keeping the wraps really parallel to each other so they lie next to each other. Okay, and then pulling hard here, just wrap 3 or 4 times along the inside edge of this loop, and then cut and tuck in the wire. I'm gonna move on, work on the other side, and I'll show you this component ready to attach the bead and then the other wire frame. So all you need to do is just cut on the inside edge here with flush cutter pliers, and then just clamp around this little wire edge, and then clamp this flat to make it nice and neat, and then just push this little section of wire down. I'm going to work on the other side and we'll come back in a few moments. Here is the component with the frame attached, and we're going to attach another frame with a bead on it onto it. So I'm just going to move that out of the way. I've got a short section of wire, probably about 6 or 7 centimeters long, maybe 8 centimeters. I'm going to push it onto the center of the wire, and then I'm just going to make a bend either side of the bead, and then cut the bead to length. It's about a 2.5 centimeter length wire tail. So just cut that to length on either side using flush cutter pliers. I'm just going to do that now. And I'm just going to curl and hammer this component and come back to you ready with the attachment process. To curl the wire ends, you don't need to curl the whole of the tail, just need to curl maybe the bottom half of it. So just in the same way you curl the other loops of things, just curl the bottom half of the wire tail. I'm just going to hammer the curls now on a steel block. And then what I'm going to do is to attach a little bit of 0.4 millimeter wire, probably about 30 centimeter. No, I'll go for 40 centimeter length of 0.4 millimeter wire, and just attach the wire around the bead. So first of all, midsection of the 0.4 millimeter wire, and wrap this side of the bead, say 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5. Flip this over. Keep the bead centrally as much as possible. And don't worry about this wire, I've got to get rid of it in a minute. Then wrap, pass it over the bead, that's 0.4 millimeter wire, and wrap to the other side. If the bead hole's really big, pass the 0.4 millimeter wire through the bead, but it's not quite big enough for this. So I'm just going to pop this 0.4 millimeter wire on the back of the setting. Mark you, that's a nicer hammered side. Let's keep it to here, like that. and this, leave these wire tails ready for attachment. Bring the other piece up, the other component, and with the wire tails downwards, slightly splay them outwards so these little tails fit close to these little loops, like so. And before we do anything, I'm just going to open up these little loops because I want to work with them. I'm going to close them back down again after we've worked with it. Slightly, with chain nose pliers, just slightly open these loops out. Very slightly, and we're going to close them back down after we've worked with it. So place the bead over the component. Really what you want to try and do is have this 0.4mm wire as close as you can to the bead. I'm going to come back with it tighter, so I'm going to redo that with a bit tighter. So I've pulled that wire a little bit more tightly around the bead. There we go. And that's ready to attach. So place the component, the bead, over the other frame and just pull these little wire tails outwards a little bit so that they sit really close to these loops on either side, these little cowls. Pass the 0.4mm wire through the back, through the hole, front to back. So there's a hole near those loops. Pull that through. I'm going to turn this around and attach this one into place. Okay. Pull that really tight, and that bead will start to sit into place. And bring the wire up inside this little loop here on this side. We're going to work on this side. Okay, and then what we're going to do is then just bind around the curl coming from the bead and this loop about 3 or 4 times. So you're binding this shape together, and this will stabilise it. It's not only attached through the hole, but now we've also attached at 2 points on either side, 2 further points on either side with these loops. So that will really keep that bead that's sitting in the hole in the shape in place. So I've done that about 3 or 4 times. Then wrap. I'm just going to make this loop a little bit wider so I can just easily wrap around this. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 times. And cut that wire on the inside edge. It's less likely to catch on clothing and unravel itself. It's on the inside edge of anything. Just smooth that down and then make that loop fit back into place. Do the same for the other side, and then you'll have a nice connector to add into your earrings. Here's that little connector section. You can see I really should have made sure that this wire was pressed down when I folded around the bead. I left a bit too much play in this wire here. And I should have, when I folded that wire down either side of the bead, I should have folded it straight down the side. So you can see there's a much nicer bend close to the bead in this finished connector here. I'm now going to talk through earring assembly. And in the longer demonstration, I'll talk through necklace assembly using all these connectors. Here's a close-up image of the earrings all made up with mirror image hammered moons, star hammered or embossed little discs, and they're attached to the main component with 5mm external diameter jump rings. You can make these on a 3mm mandrel with 1mm wire or buy them ready-made. The jump rings up here, which I've attached to shepherd hooks, are 7mm external diameter, i.e. made on a 5mm mandrel. Well, I hope you enjoy making and wearing these earrings. In this section, I'm going to show you how to make the little bead caps that fit around the 8mm beads in the necklace, and they're really simple to make, so we're going to start to make those now. So we're going to use an 8mm circle to make the bead cap. It's already got a drill hole in the centre, and I'm going to use this beautiful little dapping block with a size 9 and a size 10, which is written on the dapping block, to help me make the bead cap. So I'm going to place the little circle of metal, flat disc, into the centre of the larger size 10, and I'm going to place the ball of the little punch directly over it, and use a metalwork hammer to start to make the bead cap. A few little bashes and it'll be done. Tip it out, and it's not quite concave enough, so what I'm going to do is put it into the next one down, and this you can use this progression of sizes just to get your bead cap to the size you want. Put the smaller size 9 in there and give it another little bash around, all around, to make it lovely and circular and bowl like, and then you've made, within 2 seconds, a beautiful little bead cap to fit around your bead. We're going to show you how to make the wrap loop connector next. To make the wrap loop bead connector, you might just need to just enlarge the holes a little bit. So you can either use a needle file, or I've got a needle tool just to enlarge the holes a little bit to let the 1mm wire go through. So gently roll this around. It helps to smooth that hole down. Use a 20cm length of wire, chain nose flush cutter and round nose pliers, and a hammer and steel block are the tools you'll need. Make a sideways bend in the wire, and we're just going to zoom down a bit because I don't need it quite so close. About not halfway along, but nearly halfway along the wire, and pop some round nose pliers in and make a 6mm size loop. We need quite a large loop because I want lots of jump rings to fit into the necklace. I made a loop around the round nose pliers, grip with chain nose pliers, and just pull this around once. And actually I'm going to just cut that now and get rid of it. So I just need flush cutter pliers as close in as you can. Cut that and just smooth around this wrap loop with chain nose pliers just to smooth it down. The next thing I'm going to do, I stroked along the wire to make it nice and straight, is thread on the bead cap. You can probably hear my little son in the background playing computer games, so I apologise for squeakings and things like that. I'll thread it on a bead, an 8mm bead, and 2 bead caps either side. Press those down close against the first loop you made. Now flare the wire out slightly to one side, just beyond the bead cap. Bring in the round nose pliers and make another loop, again about 6mm wide loop. Make sure they're flat and in the same plane. The wire will cross over the loop nicely. Grip with chain nose pliers, pull the wire around once, and just going to bring in some flush cutter pliers and cut it as close to that wrap as possible, and smooth around the base of the loop with a gentle sort of motion, smoothing in the direction of the wire. So make sure these loops are in the same plane, and bring up a steel block. So we're just going to hammer those loops for a last final touch. Now this side of the connector doesn't have any wire ends on it, so that's quite nice. That might be the front of the necklace, so I'm going to hammer the back of it. Bring that up. Just hammer the loops on the edge of the block, and there you have a lovely wrap loop connector to add into your necklace with bead caps that you've made yourself. In the necklace there's a really lovely hook and loop clasp which we can incorporate into the design. I'll just show you how to make that now. So take a for both really, you take a 20cm length of 1mm wire, and we're going to start with a hook end first. Take round nose pliers and make a little circular loop with the very tips of your pliers, so it makes a little tiny P shape. Cut the end off so it'll curl more nicely. Insert the round nose pliers again and just corkscrew motion. You can see the rocking motion to make the spiral a little bit more enlarged. And then with my fingers, or we can use a mandrel or pen, just curl this round into a shepherd's hook. And I'm just stroking the wire away just to lengthen it on one side. Make a little clamp to make that little bend a little more exaggerated. And then I'm going to thread on one of the gemstones. Sorry, I'm just going to thread it on. There we go. And then just beyond this bead, which sits just below the hook, I'm just going to make a little sideways bend with chain nose pliers. Then insert the round nose pliers and make the loop to the size you want. I made them sort of fairly large. I think I made them about 5 or 6mm, 6mm loops really, so that you can fit plenty of jump rings onto them for stability around the necklace. So you can see how I pulled that round, the wire around the loop. You've got a nice loop sitting there with the wire crossing over, and I clamped some chain nose pliers around over the loop and pulled the wire around once. Now, what I forgot to show you was the fact you needed to put bead caps in either side, and I'll do that for the loop end, so just so you don't forget. So don't forget, before you do all this, pop some bead caps either side if you've made them. So now pull the wire around the bead, and you have to now grip the bead really firmly with your hand, and then if the wire's nice and soft, which this wire is, just pull it round, keeping the wire to one side of the bead, pull it around this hook end, and now just done one loop around, and now pull the wire around the bead on the other side, and now hold it really firmly, and just while the wire is lovely and warm, just loop it around this top loop. And now we just need to cut it with flush cutter pliers just inside the loop, with the flush cutter plane towards that cut end, and then bring in some chain nose pliers and just roll this wire around the loop so it's not nasty sharp edges. See what I've done there? So you've got a hook end of the clasp, and I'm just going to pop a steel block in so you can do some hammering of the hook end. So this is the side I think is the nicest side to face me, so I'm going to just hammer the other side. So I'm using a small faced hammer or a large faced hammer, doesn't really matter, as long as you can get into that little loop. Just place everything on the side of the block and just hammer to one side, and again on this side. Hammer all the way around, all the way around this shepherd's hook, and now you've got a beautiful hook end of the clasp. I'm just going to show you how to make the loop end next. I've just got to go and run and get some bead caps. We're now going to make the loop end of the clasp, and you can see it with a lovely shaped shape and bead caps there. So I'm just going to move that out of the way so you can see a bit more clearly about what I'm going to do. So taking a 20cm length of wire, I'm going to just bend just about a third of the way along from one end the wire into a loop. Just move that out so you can really see. Into a loop. You can loop that round a pen or a mandrel if you like, just so that you can just help you keep that shape. I've just clamped the wire just to make sure it looks nice, lovely and even. Again, you can vary the size of this loop to any size you like so. I'm making quite a big loop. It's lovely and easy to attach, and also it sits nicely at the back of the neck. So I'm just going to grip the wire with chain nose pliers and flare the wire out to one side with a little bend. I'm also going to grip the other side of the loop and straighten this end of the wire just by pulling it out with my fingers. I'm just going to make, you need at least 5 centimeters along on this wire tail, and I've just done one loop around just by gripping the loop here with chain nose pliers and pulling this around with my fingers. So I'm just going to thread on the bead caps, one bead cap cupping the bead, and another bead cap, and then the bead itself. This is an 8mm green fluorite, and this another little bead cap on the other side. That's all threaded on. So you can see that sitting nicely. And what I'm going to do now is just flare this wire tail out at the other end of the bead outwards a little to one side with chain nose pliers, and then I'm going to bring in round nose pliers and make a little loop around the round nose pliers. Just manipulate that so that it's nice and the same size as the other as the loop for the other clasp. It's not quite, so what I'm going to do is bring that out a bit. That's lovely, so it's the same size. Now I'm going to grip this loop with chain nose pliers and bring this wire around one loop, one turn around, so it's facing in the opposite direction to the other piece of wire. So you see you've got one facing one way and one facing the other way. Now what I'm going to do is bring the one from the loop up around the bead to just above the turn of the wire at the base of the loop, and then wrap round once and leave that wire as it is. Turning the component around, I'm going to work with the other wire tail and bring it around, taking it just below the turn this time, so it's just sitting really close to the cap. Wrap round once. This is very similar to the way we made the hook end. You can see it turns round that turn and then sits in that loop, and then just cut that inside the loop nicely and press that wire end in around this loop so that there's no loose wire ends. There we go. Just going to manipulate the turn that make that look a bit nicer. Now I can work with this one. So you can either cut that in now, cut it close to the loop, or we're going to make a bit more detail. What I'm going to do is just cut to about 15mm, and then make another little spiral in the same way that we made all these other spirals for the hook end of the clasp, cutting that end off. And then loosely spiraling with with the spiraling motion of your fingers, and you've got this lovely spiral. So what we're going to do now is hammer. This might be too difficult to hammer because it's close to the bead. You don't want to shatter anything, and you could use a plier squash. So you can get the chain nose or flat nose pliers and squash this as hard as you can. Really, really squash this. Really grip this and squash this. You can actually squash that quite flat. But if you can get a hammer in, I'll show you how we can try. Again, I usually have this elevated up like so, and I might not be able to get this with the bead as it is. Elevate that up. You can see how I can just about get a small faced hammer in and get that. Hammer the back of this loop. Work my way around the loop and hammer the smaller loop at the other side. And then finally press that loop back down. You can use your fingers or pliers to press that down over the clasp. You've got a really lovely, detailed, organic loop end of a clasp. there, and you can pair that with your hook end, which I did forget to put the bead caps on, but you can see how they work well together. And all that does is hook into here, and it's a really lovely closure if you've got dexterity problems. It's just so easy to fix the back of the necklace, and it's really secure. All you need to do is press that back with your fingers, and it's really unlikely to come out. We're now going to make some of the dangle drop components of the necklace. And we're using some of this amazing the shards of coated quartz. And there are varying heights of drill holes through the strand, so I use ones with drill holes fairly near the top, just to make it easier. I'm using about a 20 centimetre length of 1mm wire, and they go through the drill holes quite nicely. And I pop the wire through the drill hole, and just started to fold the wire up on either side, pressing it on either side of the top of the stone. You can see how I'm doing like that. Then I use chain nose pliers just to bend maybe this one wire down. I used a shorter length on this side, and you can see how it makes a sort of triangle. I'm now going to just twist this around so I can work with it more easily. I'm going to do just a slight grip around at the top of this triangle here, so I can pull the wire around to the front with one pull around. And you just need to loop it once and then fold it over like that. Next, insert some round nose pliers into the loop and then pull them around so that you're forming a wrap loop at the top around the round nose pliers. Then use chain nose pliers just to squash the loop into place, and then just pull the loop around. You can pull it twice around if you like, and so it's facing the opposite direction. Okay, so you've got one wire facing this way and one wire facing the other way. So what I did, I cut to about, well, it doesn't really matter, but as long as you cut to the same length on all of them, about 2 to 2.5 centimetres on either side, using flush cutter pliers. Put those to one side. Always save your scraps of wire for making jump rings. And then what I'm going to do is just make a rolling loop, like a spiral, using round nose pliers inserted into the end of the wire, and you cut the end, and then you just spiral it again into place. You can just press this down now, but what we're going to do is just hammer it as well. Just do it on the other side of the spiral, very loose spiral. I cut that end off so you just make sure you don't have a wonky spiral. It makes the spiral smoother and rounder if you cut that little end off. So again, just insert it into the loop and really loosely spiral. I'm just doing a sort of that sort of movement with my hand, just turning the hand while holding the piece. Now I'm going to hammer these spirals, because you could just press them over the stone as they are, but it's quite nice to hammer them. So just pull those spirals out and away from the design and bring in a steel block. And I'm using a small faced hammer, which I'm just going to get in just a moment. Here is a small faced hammer that I'm going to use to hammer the little spirals. And you hammer the back of it, in other words the underside of these spirals, holding. At the moment this will move about a bit, so just carefully so you don't fracture the stone, move it back into place. There we go. Just do that in a second. I might have done that side already. I'm going to do the other side. These spirals will help that shard stay in place, and also hammer the loop here too for a bit of detail. Now gently press over. You can just press downwards over and around the loop, around the stone, sorry, to keep it in place. And these now help stabilize this loop and stabilize the stone and keep it in place. To really make sure it also happens, just gently twist with a corkscrew action towards the loop like so, and gently press. And another insertion here, and I twist towards, like so, just a gentle twist here, and it just helps that loop sit a bit closer against the stone. And you see now you've got a lovely wrap loop component. And in the necklace itself, I hung those from the base loop of the of one of the disc components, and you'll see that later on. But there is just one of those all made up, and it's quite a pretty addition. It hides different lengths and heights of drill holes can be sort of concealed with this. Just a wire work to actually hold it in place, and also stops it rotating, and it has a lovely flat finish. I'm now going to show you how to make jump rings, and these are ever so useful if you're making jump rings in a specific wire colour and you haven't got ready-made jump rings to hand. And I also use it for using up scrap bits of wire, which is fantastic if you've got lots of odds and ends. I wind them around a mandrel and put them in the box and cut jump rings when I need them at any stage, and I never waste any wire now because I'm always making jump rings with them. So a mandrel is a circular metal rod with different diameters, and you can use the internal diameter is the actual diameter of the rod. So this is a 3mm and a 5mm rod, and this is a step mandrel with different diameters along it. Now you also use them to make jump rings. And for this project you need a 3mm mandrel and a 5mm mandrel, and when you add on the 1mm wire either side, it makes a 5mm diameter external diameter jump ring, and a 7mm diameter external diameter jump ring using the 5mm mandrel. So I'm just going to show you, I mean, you all know how to use gizmos, and this isn't really you can insert it into a bracket and wind, but sometimes I can just hand wind. So I'm just basically wrapping the wire around this rod. You do have a bit more wastage when you use it this way, and you use it with longer pieces of wire perhaps, and just wrap the wire around the mandrel like so, and really press it around, and then you leave it. You should leave it really for as long as possible, overnight perhaps, on the mandrel, and then take the rings off. It just so that the wire sort of gains its memory of being a ring, and a circular ring, and less likely to jump apart and be and it'll hold itself better. All jump ring makers will say just leave them on the mandrel for a while before cutting your jump rings. So here you can see various ones ready. These ones I made earlier, so I'm just going to cut those and just show you. I'm just going to cut the 5 ones made on a 5mm mandrel first. And I use a pair of flush cutter pliers, and if you can saw cut them, that's great. Because I've just got so few at a time, it's sometimes just easier and quicker just to use flush cutters. So I'm inserting the I might just zoom in a little bit more if I can using the camera. Just zoom in a bit more so you can see. There we go, just so it focuses. And just going to hold the jump rings in my hand, and with a flush cutter towards the jump ring that I want to make, making a flat cut. And if I turn it the other way, the pliers the other way, and insert it really close to the next ring along, next spiral along, really close to the first cut, and do another cut, that means I've got 2 flat edges for the jump ring. It's as simple as that, really. There is the jump ring. I'll hold it up close so you can see. I hope it focuses. It might not let me focus, so bear with me. There we go. You can see the flat jump ring there. So if you cut it the wrong way round, I'll just do that just so you can see the wrong way with the triangular. So basically this flat edge will leave a nice flush cut, but this is the edge of the jump ring you want. Now I've cut it the wrong way around, so if you imagine now that's all the wrong way around, and I'll actually end up with a triangular pointy end. Again, I'll try and get this to focus. There. You can see that's a triangular end to the cut, and that was a really lovely flat end. You can see that just focusing. Come on, focus. There we are. See how flat that is. And to open and close the jump rings, just use a pair of flush cutter pliers, sorry, a pair of chain nose pliers, and you can have ones with lovely curled ends as well, but if you've got 2 chain nose pliers, that's fine. And just rock the jump ring from side to side until you hear the 2 bits of metal move together nicely. And if you like, you can just compress it, and there is a closed jump ring, and you can open the jump ring and pop it onto another component if you like in a piece, and then just close it again. You can hear that little click as it closes together nicely. So that's making jump rings and opening and closing a jump ring. So you close it with a sort of a rocking motion side to side of the join. Never, ever, ever do this like that, because you'll never close it properly again. It will never close properly. So never open out like that. You can see you've deformed the jump ring. So always, always, always move it from side to side like that. So that's making and jump rings now done. We've just made this the array of components for the necklace and for the earrings, and we just got this extra lower component for the necklace, and this is made with a slightly larger frame. All I've done is wire it on in exactly the same way, and wired the bead on in exactly the same way as we did for the other components, but just with the circles, the spirals facing upwards instead of downwards. You can see the difference between the two, and that's the major difference. And you're just mounting it the other way up. So, well, in fact, actually, it's mounted the same way up with the frilly section at the bottom, but you've just got this slightly different placement of the beaded component on top of it. I'm now going to go through the assembly of the statement necklace design. It looks really complicated, but you've learnt all the techniques in the video already. You've just got to assemble the pieces together in the right order and make the right numbers of components, and you can put this necklace together. So first of all, I made 11 wrapped loop components, bead components with bead caps on them, and I alternated purple and green fluorite all around the necklace, and I linked them together with triples of 5mm external diameter jump rings and a pair of 7mm external diameter jump rings and another triple of 5mm external diameter jump rings, and I did that all the way around the necklace. And the main thing you've got to do when you make those wrap loop components is make those loops flat and parallel, so the necklace sits, the loops sit flat all around the necklace, and that means things you hang from them won't twist around because these loops are in the same plane. So I've linked those to the clasp that we made earlier in the demonstration, so that's all in there too. So you've got this main necklace first of all, and then I made 7 of the disc components here, these main beaded disc components, and I made 4 with a hammered texture and 3 with a sun ray texture, and I made those. And before I linked them up to the necklace, I hung some dangles from them. The 2 outer ones had some 6mm and crackle quartz dangles with on head pins, ball head pins with an 8mm fluorite in the middle. And you know how to make the wrap loops because they're the same technique used to make the beaded component here. You're just doing it on one side. And I hung those onto each of the lower loops of these discs with 5mm external diameter jump rings. I did that there. And you use these 6mm crackle quartz all around the lower 5 components. But I also were adding on some of these sort of projections of coated mystic quartz. They look so natural and organic, and again we made those earlier in the video as well. So just add those onto the central 5, and also with this central component down here, I'm also adding on that extra sun disc component, but facing up the other way, and I just pop that heart up the other way, or the sort of curl shape from the bead up the other way. I have talked through that earlier in the video anyway. So that connects to the central one with some 5mm external diameter jump rings in the central loop, and then 7mm diameter jump rings here. And they're connected up to the very central bead, to this disc component here, to this central bead with 2 7mm external diameter jump rings. So that's what I did there. So that central line is all done. I haven't connected these moons up yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. And this one I linked up next, and this one to this next beaded component with 2 7mm external diameter jump rings. So we've got these, and then you continue all the way around the same way, just linking these components, which all have their dangles on them, to these beaded components all around the necklace. I found that it was really easy to lay the necklace flat on a table while I assembled it all, and just slip the jump rings into place with pairs of pliers, a pair of chain nose pliers to slip it in. And that also helped me organise everything in place and make sure I linked the correct component to the correct link in the chain, basically. The next thing I did was link all these beaded disc components together, and I did that by putting 2 5mm jump rings through these side curls of the disc components, and then linking them together with a pair of 7mm external diameter jump rings. And then from each one, I did that all the way around the necklace, and then from each one of those I hung a hammered moon disc, and those moon discs are made in the same way as the earrings that you saw earlier, and they're hung with a 7mm external diameter jump ring. So I think that's it. So you've got the central necklace component with the clasp all linked together. You link these disc components with their dangles up to each wrap loop bead. You've also added these hammered star discs, and then you link the second row or the lower row together with their own links of jump rings, and then hang from that the hammered moons, and make sure the moons are facing in opposite directions as you go around the necklace. So you need 6 of those little moons. So I hope you enjoy making this necklace. It's got a beautiful feel to it, and when worn it even makes a little jingling sort of like bell-like noise with all the copper components. And please post or tag me when you post on Facebook so I can see what you make. I hope you enjoy making it. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the demonstration today and the techniques you've learnt. I very much look forward to seeing what you make using these techniques. Please tag me on Facebook when you post so that I can get back to you and comment on what you've made. So I do hope you enjoy making some of the designs that I brought to you in these videos. Bye bye.